Hello, welcome. How's it going? Just letting everybody have a chance to jump on. My name is Amanda Nyberg, registered dietitian, and I am so excited for you guys to be here for the next 45 to 60 minutes because we are going to be talking all about the thyroid and how maybe absolutely important it is to your health, how it's possibly being mismanaged in your own life and what we can do about it. And I'm so excited to bring someone who knows so much more about the thyroid than I do to the panel to really educate us all in better understanding this kind of hot topic. So, overall, I think that we undervalue the importance of our thyroid, and we probably don't realize how much of a role it plays in our overall health. Our thyroid is responsible for up to 60% of our metabolic rate, our BMR. It's responsible for the type of energy we feel throughout the day. It's responsible for our hair growth. It's responsible for protein synthesis, aiding in digestion. It's responsible for temperature regulation and our mental health. It's even responsible for healthy cholesterol levels. And I feel like we have a chronic level of thyroid dysfunction in the United States for many different reasons. And we're probably going to address that tonight. And I also think that, right now the standard of care for thyroid health is not optimal. So I'm really excited to bring Mandy Snell into this webinar to teach us everything that she knows. Can you see us, Mandy? We can't see you. Let me see if I can get your video working here. Let me see here. I'm going to ask to unmute while she's working to get her microphone on and her video working. I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of background about Mandy. She is in the Lexington, Kentucky area, which is where I am. I feel very blessed to have such a knowledgeable practitioner locally to work with on my own thyroid health. She is actually opening up a second location in the Nashville area. So those of you in Tennessee can have access to work with her as well. But she worked for nearly 27 years in an acute setting as a nurse practitioner. And about 10 years ago, she became the medical director for a very large weight loss clinic. And during her time there, she started to notice nuances between clients, patients that were having lots of success with weight loss and feeling better, and clients that were, kind of doing the same thing, but not seeing the same results. And this is what led to her passion in the field of endocrinology. And since that time, she's really dove into the science of hormones, hormone therapy for women, as well as thyroid health. So let's see if I can get her. Let me see. It's always the technology, guys, and it's probably my fault. Let me see. I'm going to make her. Let's see if that works. And we can get her visualizing it. But like myself, she is very much driven by data. She is a science nerd, I would say. I used to call myself the renegade dietitian when I worked in the hospital because the other dietitians were carrying around like spray butter and fat-free ranch dressing. And I was saying, no, eat grass-fed butter and, animal protein's not bad for you, because I just knew that the standard of care in which we were delivering was dated and did not follow the science in which we were seeing. So I appreciate that in her, that she's willing to look beyond what we think is the norm to find out like what's really going on. I mean, if our standard of care was adequate, why does everyone still have such thyroid issues? So welcome, Mandy. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So just a little intro about yourself. Was talking about the importance of thyroid. We have so much to cover, so I would just love for you to dive in. Hopefully we're gonna chat for the next about 30, 40, 45 minutes, and then maybe have some time to open up some questions. But yeah, tell us all about the thyroid and what we need to know.
Well, I'll have to just warn you that my staff confronted me weeks or months ago about going too long. I'm going to watch the time closely, but you just interrupt me anytime you want to because everyone at Solutions is somewhat on fire because we are mentored by a lot of functional medicine experts and renown around the country. So I want to say we are not unicorns, but we do carry this exciting message that is very evidence-based. And there's some tension there in functional medicine that seemed like, this was 25 years ago seemed to be maybe some junk science and some bravado, but now the outcomes and the science and the safety profile are starting to change the standard of care. Now, good science, we know that good science doesn't change the standard of care for 8 to 15 years. And so there are a lot of lives that are fallen through in that amount of time waiting for things to catch up. And of course and of course I've been that provider. So my goal is not to throw traditional medicine under the bus because we try not to do that knowing that we've been there. I used to think TSH had the answers as well until I knew better. But like we say in the office, like once you know better, you do better. And it's okay to pivot as a provider and say, we were wrong about some things in the past. And now that we know some things differently. And I'll say this, I mean, I, again, had been a provider in acute care, thousands of patients over 27 years before. And of course, I started to slide into the functional medicine space almost 10 years ago before it was hip. And I would actually, if I were honest, I said to myself many a time, um, all my symptoms went away when I started taking Synthroid. Said no patient ever in my experience. I didn't have an explanation for that for so long. But now when you see it as a clinician, once you see it, you can't unsee it, Amanda. And once you know that you have a message to carry people and give them hope, then you can't be silenced as well. So it's kind of an exciting time because there's a lot of evidence-based functional medicine, Cleveland Clinic, particularly Avexia's Health Solutions, who are some of my heroes, who are charging the gates of the ivory towers, as I always say, um, to change the standard of care, saying that, listen, some of these studies that we see commonly done in endocrinology, internal medicine offices, primary care, they're not sufficient to reflect where patients are in the spectrum of their thyroid health.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I loved about Mandy and her clinic and how she works with clients is, I was so focused on, my labs. Are my labs right? Are my labs good? Where should my labs be? And at the end of the day, I remember her saying, yes, we want to see your labs in certain area, but we are more concerned about treating your symptoms and the way you feel than just simply looking at a piece of paper and saying you're good or you're not good. And I know a lot of you deal with that. You're chronically fatigued, you can't lose weight, can't sleep, you go to your doctor, they check your labs and they're like, you're good. You're just stressed out and too tired, and go home and get a good night's sleep. So I
Well,
appreciate that.
I think I've decided that sometimes when we say as clinicians, like, well, your labs are normal, sometimes what they're saying is like, I don't have an intervention. That's what they're trying to say.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, let's dive in and talk all about the thyroid and what we
Okay.
should know and what we're looking at.
Well, I want to follow what you said earlier about basal metabolic rate. We kind of had this cliche term in the last couple decades about, well, thyroid, that controls your metabolism. It does so much more than that, but it is absolutely dependent in every organ, every muscle, every organ, every cell is dependent upon thyroid function. And so, and actually you can't separate thyroid away from the other endocrine organs. So what are those? There's a thyroid, breast, adrenal glands, ovaries, testicles, prostate. You can't separate this circuit of secretory organs from each other because they do affect each other very much. And of course, we follow that at Solutions in our office all the time, and we see that effective. And so learning about hormone health, some people naturally like assume that's around menopause and those things, but you can't separate them from one another. But certainly so very important. And in fact, we also know, and functional medicine is standing at the mountaintops with a bullhorn saying thyroid hormone values have changed so much. 40 years ago, well, we could just use testosterone as an example briefly. We know that testosterone values in men and women have dropped 50% in the last 40 years. 50%. Why? It's environmental factors. It's our diet. It's our microbiome. It's absorption. It's processed food, of course, and all those things is about vitamin D absorption. So for the same reasons, thyroid health has changed. When we talk about in the office about the value of free T3 hormone, in 1985, healthy 15-year-old males had a 50th percentile range of free T3 of 8. Do you know what the range of free T3 now? The average, the 50th percentile right now is 3.5.
Wow.
Wow.
And what she's saying, and I talk about this a lot, is, you know, a lot of people don't realize that optimal lab values, you know, that range that you see
Mhm.
on your, you know, lab sheet when you get your labs have shifted over the
Yes.
last 40 to 50 years because they base those optimal ranges
Mhm.
on the population, which when I learned that about 2 years ago, it was absolutely mind blowing. Like
Right.
how like lab values, optimal levels should be static, you know, they should
Yes.
never change, you know, so why are we shifting what we consider to be normal when we know that we have such a decline in our overall health
Mhm.
and wellness? I thought that that was really shocking. And
Yeah.
that's why I tell a lot of people, you know, we're not looking for your labs to be normal. We want them to be optimal. And
Right.
sometimes that's not in that range.
That's exactly right. Our practice manager, Keisha, heard me say something to a client a couple of years ago that uh, normal is just common, and we're not interested in feeling common. And so she coined that on a T-shirt for us a while
I
back.
love that.
I love that
We
too. So,
definitely want to be better than common for sure.
yeah, we definitely want to be better than if you look around, it's a fallen world. We're not interested in feeling common. You can't have coffee with a friend who eventually, when we get transparent with each other, we're tired and we're not sleeping well. And we don't have enough energy to finish the day. It's not, and it's just it's an epidemic really. And we have some things to explain that, ways to explain that. And if we just jump in, I'll just introduce you to a couple of common lab tests that we do. Shall I get start?
Yeah, let's do it. Start
All
there.
right, so TSH. TSH, everyone, this is the most common screening tool that you'll see across the board commonly in conventional medicine. It stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It stimulates this gland. TSH does not come from the thyroid. It comes from the brain. So the brain is the pituitary gland is always on this reconnaissance mission looking for thyroid hormone. The thyroid gland has mostly one biggest job, and that's to make a hormone called T4. The 4 actually stands for the number of iodine molecules on that, so it's been kind of nicknamed that, and we'll get into iodine in a moment. But T4 hormone, as long as your gland is making T4, the brain is satisfied, and it keeps this number really low. Should the thyroid gland get lazy or sick from maybe Hashimoto's or other issues, then the brain knows this immediately. We're just miraculously made. So the thyroid gland will raise the TSH up to stimulate the thyroid gland to say, hey, bully it, wake up. And the body's real sensitive to that. If the thyroid doesn't respond, it'll go up again. If it doesn't respond, it goes up again. You get the idea. You don't have hypothyroidism, according to the American College of Endocrinology, until the TSH gets higher than 4. And so 4 is considered, a high number as for a clinician. Now, when you see a TSH higher than 4 as a clinician, the treatment for that just makes a lot of sense. You substitute with T4 hormone, which is most commonly known as Synthroid in a trade name, or levothyroxine as a generic name. So whether your thyroid gland is generating T4 hormone or you take it as a pill, the brain will recognize that and it'll bring the TSH back down, with your pituitary now satisfied that you have that you are generating T4. But this is the caveat in that knowledge. T4 hormone is completely inert. It doesn't have a job anywhere. It doesn't move a cell to feel better. It doesn't ignite energy production. It doesn't change BMR. It's simply, the only thing that T4 moves is the pituitary gland. That's it. So just because you have a normal TSH and normal T4 doesn't necessarily mean you feel better. That's where functional medicine is crying out, saying, listen, there's a lot of people with normal TSH less than 4 who still have brain fog, they have anxiety, they have weight gain, they have inability to lose weight, constipation significantly associated with thyroid disease, a low mood, dry skin, hair loss, fatigue. Did I say fatigue? Did I mention fatigue? And so all of these symptoms. Now, one of the problems in chasing that data is because much of that is subjective. How do you quantify hair loss? That's much more easy to quantify than brain fog, right? Or irritability, or low mood, or anxiety, depression. So, and of course, there's so many etiologies of these vague symptoms that that it's often the data is going to be not going to be well-rounded. But the body has to turn T4 into hormone T3. This is the active form of T3. So where are those receptors? Well, they're everywhere, Amanda. They're in the brain, the heart, the lung, bone, muscle, gut, everywhere. What does T3 do? Well, it goes to the cell wall and where it connects to a receptor and ignites the mitochondria, still called powerhouse in the cell in high school now, as it did when Gen Xers heard powerhouse in the cell, and generates ATP production, which is your energy molecule. So one caveat about that is that, unfortunately, T3 isn't really followed enough. And when it is followed, it's mostly in the form of blood tests called total T3. Well, total T3 is a really large number. It's a large number, but unfortunately, total T3 is bound to a protein. It's just as inert and unavailable to the cell as T4. So the real marker for success is a number called free T3. It is a fraction of the total T3, the fraction of that. And free T3 is a number, the higher it is, the better you feel. That's an overgeneralization. But the height of that number is the number that corresponds with relief of brain fog, anxiety, depression, weight gain, inability to lose weight, constipation, dry skin, hair loss, and fatigue. So functional medicine is saying, listen, free T3, this is a number to follow. So what is the normal free T3? Well, it's 2.5 to 4.4, with the 50th, the middle of the road, being around 3.5. Unfortunately, LabCorp recently changed in the last year the common range no longer to be 2.5 to 4.4, but it's 2.0 to 4.4 on lab values. Do you know how many people who feel very, very sick, way on the left side of that bell curve, way on the left of that, are now being pushed into a normal range, and they do not feel normal? Now, no one's really denying that people in the 4.4 range, they definitely feel better than people who are on the left side, around 2 and 2.5. But even if you're at 2.9, that's the 25th percentile. we try to make sure that we get everyone. If I have a patient who's on the left side of that bell curve, between 2 and 3.5, I'm never going to get them feeling better until I get them at least closer to 4. And I'm not going to, and if they have a problem with converting T4 to T3 or to free T3, I'm never going to get them feeling better using T4 hormone, levothyroxine, or Synthroid. I'm never going to get in there. I have to use a T3 hormone to do that. So that's explained like the uptick in the use of dual therapy, meaning a hormone that is not only T3, but sometimes a combination of T4 and T3 therapy, which you'll see on the uprise more and more and more. I have changed a lot of patients who come to us who've been on T4 therapy for a long period of time. And this is a collaborative relationship. We're not going to tell them what to do. We're not going to disrespect their providers who put them on T4 hormone, but we are going to show them the science of that and challenge in the studies and challenge them that like you have a choice here to consider using dual therapy to help them get to feeling better. So I've done that to hundreds of patients. I have not gotten a nasty gram from an endocrinologist yet. But if I do, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a lady and we're going to send the Google file of all that science and start to change the industry in a collaborative way and try to make peace with this tension that's in the medical industry about getting people feeling better. I think a lot of, if I can say it, I think a lot of clients have been gaslighted with, denial of that their thyroid is part of the problem.
I mean, it almost sounds like cholesterol, the history of cholesterol, how we, looked at total cholesterol as the end all for your risk for heart disease. And, and then it came about
Yeah,
that, oh, well, it's not really total cholesterol. Now we really need to be looking at, HDL versus LDL and your particle size. And we can see how long it even took us to get that to here. I mean, we still have practitioners treating total cholesterol. And I feel like what you're saying is the same thing with how we look at TSH. It's basically like a moot lab, right?
it really is. We should follow that. Indeed, we should definitely follow TSH, but it should not be the governor of therapy and the decision maker of therapy. In fact, and let me say this too, I have patients who are on the left side of the bell curve. They have a 2.9 free T3, and I'm looking at them like, so how do you feel? And I'm like, I feel great. And so treat the patient. So the other symptoms like brain fog to fatigue that I mentioned earlier, I kind of zero in on the ones that are very specific to thyroid: hair loss, dry skin, and constipation. Constipation is very much related to thyroid and not appreciated as such. And if they really don't have any of those issues, they feel, but they're also on other therapies that we apply at our office. And so again, you just have to treat the patient, not treat the person, not the number, because even lab values are a snapshot of the moment. Those numbers do move. Now, does someone move to the far left of that normal range at 2.5 and then jump to 4.5 back and forth? No, no, they really don't. But that's a great segue into saying this, Amanda. When it comes to T3 hormone and dual therapy for clients, you don't want to just throw new pills at people, right? That is what everyone in the industry is doing. Like, oh, let's pass out another prescription. What you really want to do is ask the question, like, what is hindering me and how do I heal my conversion of T4 to T3? How do I do that? Because there are a lot of things that we know hinder that, and that could be the key for a lot of people. One of the first things we know that hinders conversion is, guess number one, is vitamin D deficiency, which is an epidemic. So we made vitamin D like part of our treatment plan for all of our clients because of its role in immune health and hormone health and mental health and thyroid health as
What do you
well.
like your D level to be at?
We search for a goal of a minimum of 60. Some voices, some very credible scientists would say 70 is your goal. It's a fat soluble vitamin. It's very hard to get toxic with vitamin D. In 8 years, I've met 3 people who had a vitamin D greater than 100. One of them was me. And it's just really hard to do that. It's fragile. For people who are living in a vitamin D, unfortunately, of 25, it will take them 3 to 4 months to climb with good product, taking it in the right way, because all the stars have to align for you to absorb vitamin D well, taking it the right way at the right timing with the fat, blah, blah, blah. It'll take them 3 to 4 months to rise to that value because it's a fat soluble vitamin
And
and
I
it
do,
is
it is
fragile,
important. It is important to know, guys, again, your lab may look normal, but it may be 30, which is normal.
which
It
is
may be
normal.
40, which is normal,
Yeah.
again, so it's understanding the difference between optimal versus normal.
Mm.
Okay, so yeah,
Yes.
vitamin D is a big one.
North American labs across the country, university hospitals, LabCorp, CPL, Quest, all list vitamin D normal to be 30 to 100. And functional medicine says no. No, we're not interested in that. You're not functional. And now pandemic taught us a lot about that.
Mhm.
We learned from pandemic that those people who had vitamin Ds of 50, who are unicorns, by the way, that they just were never hospitalized with COVID. And that taught us a lot.
What are some of the other blockages with the
So
conversion of T4 to T3?
the second one is insulin resistance.
Mm.
Insulin resistance, and have you can have insulin resistance before you have an elevation in your hemoglobin A1C. You absolutely can. Hemoglobin A1C, if you don't know, is a really smart piece of math and science. Your red blood cells have a lifespan of about 90 days. And then they lyse and the bone marrow recycles the hemoglobin and makes fresh new ones in the bone marrow. Well, red cells are also kind of sticky and they have this residual sugar. And this particular blood test takes the older senescent cells, as they're called, and recognizes the leftover stickiness on those cells and generates a number on a spectrum that deems what your sugar average has been for the last 90 days of the life of that cell. Of course, 5.7 to 6.5 is considered prediabetes, and 6.5 and beyond is considered diabetes. Now, it wasn't too long ago 5.7 to 7 was considered pre-diabetes. No longer 6.5 is now, because the predictability of people over 6.5 to become diabetic was was pretty correlated. But that's also a soft number. You can have and some of the cues that we look for in functional medicine that can give you a clue is something called a lower sex hormone binding globulin. These people have early evidence in their sex hormone binding globulin blood test. That is evidence of insulin resistance, even way before patients will show, especially elevated in their elevation in A1C. We see that a lot in PCOS, young women with PCOS. They're really sensitive to insulin and they're used. And so they've been told there's no way you have PCOS because your A1C is fine, but they have a sex hormone binding globulin in the 20s.
What about fasted insulin? That's a lab that I talk a lot about. Is that something that can predict insulin resistant or no?
Well, it's very sensitive to fasting. If you have a brand new client who's never been fasting, they've been overeating for a long period of time, they're newly committed to a new lifestyle, they're going to have an insulin of 40. But you get them fasting for as long as like 7 days, their insulin comes down. And
Okay.
so it's very, insulin labs are very, very sensitive. And so it's not as predictable depending, like if you've got someone with a low insulin, you're going to say, what have you been doing for the last week?
Yeah,
But it falls drastically and not as useful to, well, it's not as useful to scare a patient, if they're
right,
already,
right.
been practicing some good habits.
Just a couple of questions real quick, and I just want to keep this kind of going up. But people are saying, I just looked at my labs and I don't even see where T3 was drawn. Is this a standard lab?
It's not standard lab. It's not.
Not.
We say this in Lexington all the time. You can tell a lot about a provider for the tests that they order. When our clients come to us as new onset initial clients, they'll say, "Well, I've got some labs from my doctor. Can I bring them? 100% of the time, the answer is yes. How many times do they actually have everything we need? I can tell you there are two other providers in Lexington that I know follow free T3. I know who they are. I want to have coffee with them because I feel like, oh, like-minded soulmates, in medicine. But it's not very common test. It's T3, and even when, like I said, even when T3 is followed, it's typically followed as total T3.
Right. And someone said, is T3 uptake the same as free T3?
No, no, it's
No.
not.
Yeah. So specifically, and guys, if you go to my website, I have a free lab guide, and I share with you that full thyroid panel. I mean, do you just want to mention that real quick in terms of what you like to see in a full thyroid panel?
I love to see. I do see TSH. It's reckless not to follow
Yes.
TSH, of course. And of course, with we follow T4, we follow free T3. It's just
Free T3.
free
Very important.
T3.
Not total
Correct.
T3, free T3.
Free T3. We also follow TPO antibodies to discuss, to look for hints of thyroiditis, also known as Hashimoto's thyroiditis. But let me finish those mentions of the things that hinder
Yes.
conversion before we jump into thyroiditis. I'm watching my
Yes.
time. Boy, how time flies when we're together, Amanda. So,
So
so the
good. So much
five
good
things
information.
that hinder conversion: vitamin D deficiency, number one. Number two, insulin resistance. Just another good reason to delay breaking your fast in the morning. Just little things help your thyroid function. Number three is stress. Number four, no one's got any of that, right? Number four is selenium deficiency, and number five is iodine deficiency. 4 and 5 are epidemic issues. Some of my favorite topics are micromineral. Selenium, the reason selenium is so specific is that it is the building block of the enzyme responsible for conversion. Not hormone, but enzyme. And selenium is number 34 in the periodic table. It's a micromineral. This gem is underappreciated and it doesn't get a lot of press, but it should. Minerals are things that our bodies don't make them, our bodies don't store them, and so we have to replace them. And so where do we get selenium? Another micromineral. Well, this is the textbook answer. We get mineral from fruits and vegetables that are grown in mineral-rich soil. So not to be sarcastic or anything, but we know if we're naive thinking that our soils are mineral rich, we're gonna hurt our health. So we invite all of our clients to consider keeping a bag of Brazil nuts in your desk, in your car, in by your coffee pot, like we have at the office. Brazil nuts are unusually rich in selenium, and it just takes 2 of them a day to meet all of your necessary stores. And how simple is that for our health? Super simple to do that. Of course, if you are allergic to nuts or you just think you don't like them, then the dose for selenium would be 100 to 200 micrograms a day. Not hard to do. That finally, iodine is so misunderstood and it is so necessary for our health. Iodine deficiency was discovered to be the source of goiter 100 years ago. And as a result of discovering that, RDA was established years ago. It's 150 micrograms, which is just this tiny amount. Iodized salt followed that. And of course, goiter was essentially wiped off of the history books, we hope, because of discovering this deficiency associated with iodine many, many years ago. And this is my 30th year as a nurse practitioner. I've never seen a grotesque, cystic, and large goiter in my lifetime. I can see it in the vintage pictures, but now we don't. But guess what? We have a new goiter coming up. We have new iodine deficiency because of endocrine disruption. So if you've ever heard of the term endocrine disruption, it's different from really a toxin. And it's hurting our thyroid glands. And this is an epidemic. And it's a wave of iodine deficiency that's not being served through iodized salt. After the mid-century, of course, iodine was used medicinally for so many things, and it was a super safe food preservative called potassium iodide. If you grew up in the 70s like I did, and as Gen Xers, and you had a simple sandwich, you had 200 times the RDA of iodine, and you were simply just fine. But we also started studying Graves' disease in the 70s, and the concern that too much iodine might be the cause of that was legitimate question. We know now that that's not the case, but we didn't then. And so potassium iodide was replaced in 1980 with something called potassium bromide. Now, iodine and bromide, if you look at them on the periodic table, they're in the same column. They're called the halogen column, and they are first cousins. They have the same number of electrons in the outer ring. They have the same similar properties. And even now, potassium, it's hard to find non-brominated bread flour, and bread product. You can find it, but you just have to do your homework. And also, now, unfortunately, bromine is a fire retardant. It is in all of our mattresses we sleep on, our sofa, our cushions, our kids' car seats, our big jackets, our carpet, our car upholstery when we sit in it gives us a cloud of bromine. Brominated vegetable oil, unfortunately, is illegal in Europe and Asia, but it's not illegal in America. So that said, I love to quote David Brownstein's work. David Brownstein and Guy Abraham are on every bibliography of every medical machine in America who've ever made a position statement about iodine. And their work shows that that we have bromine in the body and iodine in the body, and when they compete for location on our hormone molecule, as well as all of our endocrine organs, like we mentioned, when I mentioned thyroid, breast, adrenals, ovaries, testicles, prostate, they all uniquely have to be saturated in iodine, with the thyroid taking 70% of that. So when we have iodine and bromine in the body together, they compete for location on those seats. And sometimes if you're bromine dominant, bromine will compete with iodine and kick it off of receptors. And we urinate those ions of iodine out of our body, and bromine is sitting in the seat of our hormone undetected. But people don't feel quite right. Lab tests aren't determining this. The good news has finally come, and that it's very, very, very easy to fix. You just have to become iodine dominant. There's a process called, from the Brownstein research, of course, where you do iodine loading. This is 2 milligrams a day, which is, no, forgive me, 2 drops a day, which is 12 milligrams a day of Lugol solution. And so this happens when you reach saturation point, which is about a 2 to 3 week period, there's a new event takes place. And when this event takes place, iodine will compete for its location on receptors. It will win against bromine and kick bromine off of receptors, and you urinate the bromine away. Some people experience this as a detox reaction known as bromine flu, and you can read about that online. And there's ways to manage that really comfortably. We warn patients about that. Well, how you manage that is drinking a lot of water with a little mineralized salt in it, a lot of B vitamins for methylation benefit, and of course high dose vitamin C, and you can overcome that detox reaction. Not everyone feels that. But iodine for everyone, Lugol solution is more concentrated than iodized salt. And I would invite anybody who's really curious about iodine to read David Brownstein's work on iodine, as well as The Iodine Crisis, written by Lynn Farrow. Lynn Farrow did a meta-analysis on iodine, basically showing all the science for the last 100 years, particularly from 1980 until now, showing that in 1980, the incidence of breast cancer in women was 1 in 23 women, and the incidence of prostate cancer was 1 in 7 men. Now it's 1 in 7 and 1 in 3, respectively, and she makes a very compelling relationship between iodine deficiency. And we all know someone who has new thyroid cysts. And thyroid cysts, of course, we're following these cysts because we want to make sure that they do the serial ultrasounds, make sure they don't change, make sure we get biopsies done when it's necessary for the purposes of surveillance, that they don't turn into what? Thyroid cancer. The incidence of thyroid cancer is very high. But guess what? The simple solution is that thyroid cysts are nothing more than iodine deficiency and goiter in its infancy. As simple as that. So I invite you to read that literature.
Yeah. So, when we think about, and I see some mothers in here and they're like, my daughter is, dealing with thyroid issues and Hashimoto's, and I always say, like, when I'm 47, and when I was in high school, no one had PCOS, and no one had, food allergies, and no one had, all of these kind of chronic illnesses that we're seeing young adults have right now. And I hope that that explanation that she just made allows you guys to see that the shifts and the things that we've allowed in our food system and in our environment, these endocrine disruptors, in addition to the lack of the mineral in our soils, and just our overall lacking of nutritional quality in our food, and the rise of, insulin resistance, and, our massive decline in vitamin D, which probably wasn't an issue 50 years ago, is why we're seeing so many people dealing with thyroid issues.
Well, I want to say one more point before we talk about Hashimoto's, which I don't want to miss that opportunity.
Yes.
Is that I have, chased a lot of, like, gone to Whole Foods and all the vitamin shop, and one of my favorite supplements besides Avexius is Thorne with the E.com. They've got an outstanding thyroid support supplement to support the thyroid, which includes vitamin D and includes selenium for obvious reasons. But even across the board, the iodine in these supplements is in the microgram level. It is based on within a percentage range of RDA. Microgram iodine will not cause you to overcome bromine blockade and endocrine disruption. You have to use a Lugol solution. So 6 quick things about Lugol solution. You can find this stuff on Amazon. Lugol solution is the only supplement that I buy on Amazon. And the reason I feel good about that is because it tastes so terrible that it validates that it's the real thing.
I'm going to put the link to it in the chat.
It's just awful. And 2 drops of Lugol solution. So Lugol solution is the old 1890s solution. You're not going to see on the solution bottle a dose for human use. We're dependent on the Brownstein and Abraham research for that, which we know is 2 drops a day for 12 milligrams minimum. But it's 2 ions of iodine. It's potassium iodide and potassium iodine. Your body needs both. It's non-organic, meaning those people who are allergic to shellfish can take Lugol solution without fear of allergy because it's not bound to that protein. It tastes terrible. Like I said, you can get a Lugol solution in a pill form, which is easier to tolerate. It's just going to cost you a little more an investment. And you can also put Lugol solution on your skin. A lot of ladies don't like to do that simply because it'll permanently stain our clothing. But also our children need this. You can put your kids in a headlock and put a drop of this stuff on their tongue if you want to. It's probably a lot easier to put some on a cotton swab and rotate little dots of this stuff around them every couple of days, because there are a lot of young children with behavioral issues and IQ issues that are direct relationship to low iodine and low iodine in pregnancy as well. So pregnant women need and women preparing to be pregnant need to read about this material. If you read Brownstein's work directly, when we think about, wow, the difference between micrograms and 12 milligrams is a canyon worth of iodine difference. But the truth is, if you read Brownstein's work directly, he would actually advise you to, go through bromine detox, live on 12 milligrams a day, because we don't live in a bubble, to keep ourselves maintenance from bromine. But a couple of times a year, he would have you double that 3 times to 12 milligrams, to 50 milligrams, to 100 milligrams. 12 to 25 to 50 to 100 for the purposes of routine deep bromine detox, because when you do so, and you did what's called 24-hour urine collections for bromine testing in your urine, they pour bromine out of their body.
Yeah, and just to answer Dawn's question, yes, you guys, there is a replay coming. I know this is so much information, and you're going to want to listen to it kind of over and over. So you'll have that resource available. But I definitely want to make sure we talk about Hashimoto's.
Yes.
And then also, it's like, I definitely want to make sure that we don't miss, like, what do we do?
Sure.
What's the treatment? How do we get ourselves right?
So thyroid peroxidase antibodies, or TPO antibodies, they should be less than 30. When you see this elevation in that, some people are panicked. They're absolutely panicked. And when they see that number rise and fall, they don't know how to interpret that. So let me give you some comfort. The presence of TPO antibodies is not an acute disease. Let's define that specifically. It is evidence of an event that happened to you. So let me describe it with this analogy. I'm in healthcare. 30 years ago, I had to have an hepatitis B vaccine series to be in healthcare. And I now have antibodies that can be tested with a test called a titer to make sure that it worked, that I have antibodies against hepatitis B. If I change employers and I lose that little card proving that I have it, I have to get another titer blood test to show that I don't need the series. I have the antibodies. What happens when you hear what is Hashimoto's? You'll hear bad article, copy material language saying that the body attacked the thyroid. That is a misnomer altogether. What actually happened is a protein escaped the body, likely from the gut. So we got a gut issue original, escaped the gut, a unique protein, and it went to the body and it got into its wrong location and made inflammation. If that same protein got into the joints, we would call it rheumatoid arthritis. But if it got into the thyroid gland, and we call it thyroiditis, the immune system recognized this invasion and rose to make antibodies against that protein to protect the gland. Not everyone who's had this attack from the protein actually has hypothyroidism. The real injury comes from checking the T4, free T3, and TSH production to make sure that your thyroid is a reflection of how much injury actually occurred. There are many people who have normal thyroid hormone and they have antibodies. Does that make sense? So the degree of the injury is followed by the hormone. The degree of the antibodies is not a reflection of disease. So how do we follow that number? It's pretty, just like I should always have hepatitis B titer antibodies for life, most people will carry TPO antibodies for life. And the number will move if you continue to expose yourself with that protein. Say the protein is, heaven forbid, gluten. Then if that's the protein, if you reduce your gluten, then guess what? Your antibodies get less and less busy, less production, and that number comes down. If you read about, how can I lower my TPO antibodies? Some of the things that we know about gluten can be the culprit. Dairy protein or casein or whey protein can be the culprit. Soy could be a culprit, but the truth is we really don't know. If you eliminate all those things at one time and your TPO antibodies come down, we really don't know, right? Which one it was. And it's really just conjecture. It could be coincidence, really. We just don't have a way to know what that protein is that generated that antibody response. So when you see those numbers go up or down, then you may be exposing yourself to the protein or not. But again, following the hormone, but the first thing to do is get the hormone right. And then TPO antibodies can be a moving target, and it can be confusing to clients to see that number move around. But it's not a reflection of active disease, it's a reflection of an event. And we see this event happen a lot in pregnancy. We see it happening, we've seen a lot more since COVID as well.
So what you're saying, what I hear you saying is that, when you're number one, we cannot say that if you have Hashimoto's that you need to eliminate, definitively gluten,
Right.
dairy, soy, because everyone is actually being impacted by something different.
Yes.
So you really have to maybe think about eliminating one at a time
Yes.
to really see which one is impacting you.
And you need a provider who's willing to follow those labs with you and survey that and do a little.
What do you feel like, let's say you eliminate dairy, how long between lab checks, like how long, if you eliminate it for a week, are you going to see a change? Does it take 3 months? Does it?
I would, I'm gonna go out on a limb here because I have to say, I don't deserve your confidence to know. I just don't know.
Yeah.
What I've learned about that, I've learned really a lot from clients who've said, I did have Hashimoto's, I cleaned up my diet, and now their antibodies are sitting there in front of us together, less than 30, and we're celebrating together.
Right.
But sometimes those are soft numbers, so I have to say I don't know.
And at the end of the day, when you have Hashimoto's, you do basically use the same thyroid treatment protocol to make sure that you've
Mm.
got good T4 to T3 conversion.
Yeah. Yes, listen to patients. Do they have the symptom profile? Listen to them. If they have that symptom profile, they may benefit. There's also something known as low dose naltrexone. It is not FDA approved for thyroid and inflammatory disease, but we introduce it to our clients and give them a lot of monographs on this. There is great science out there showing that low dose naltrexone is helping people with inflammatory disease and autoimmune disorders with their symptom profile. And we introduce our clients to that, and we've seen some incredible outcomes with it. It's subjective, so it's hard to know how much of that is just getting more sleep, meditating, making good food choices, and moving
Yeah.
your body. It's hard to know.
Yeah, and I want to say, at the end of the day, we're talking a lot about medical intervention. We're talking a lot about supplements, and we're talking a lot about, medications. But, taking a medication without lifestyle change, you're not going to get the same benefits. Like at the end of the day, we're not spending a lot of time talking about, your diet and your exercise and your sleep and your stress management. But those things matter so much. And I want to make sure that we put a plug in for that. One quick thing before we go into, fixing a thyroid. A lot of people reach out and is like, I don't have a thyroid. So
Oh.
in that scenario, is it just, again, a management of, treating the conversion?
These clients need more. Those clients need more. They usually need it twice a day. They need more T4, they need more T3, and they need more of it. They
For
can,
that dual therapy.
yes.
And you didn't mention, like you said, the T4 is levothyroxine, but I don't think you ever mentioned what the T3 is.
It's known as desiccated thyroid, sometimes known as leothyronine.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my favorites is NP thyroid. And it's a dual therapy. It's a 4-to-1 ratio. It's a tiny bit of T4, but mostly T3. T4 is a half-life of 2 weeks. And so you really have this lower dose that climbs slowly for 2 weeks. But the T3 portion of that has a half-life of a day. You take it in the morning on an empty stomach, like all the other thyroid meds. And then you have this bell curve in the day. It goes up and it goes down the same day. And it gives you ATP for the benefit. I'm sorry, it gives you free T3 hormone every day, anew in the morning, for the benefit of helping your cells to be ignited by mitochondria. And it can be life-changing. We have clients who had been on Synthroid for 20 years. They had been on 2 prescription constipation medications and were absolutely in agony, living life like with the pulling their life up by their bootstraps kind of life, and making it about just climbing through mud every day. We got them on dual therapy, and another something that I've noticed, particularly with people who've been on Synthroid or T4 hormone for a long period of time, they have higher values of something called reverse T3. Reverse T3 is an isomer. It's a mirror image of T3 and free T3, and it will occupy the receptor, but guess what? It will ignite at the receptor. And I wish I understood myself why these clients have more reverse T3, but this is just correlated specifically with people who've been on Synthroid for a long period of time. And you have to gently convert them to dual therapy, and they thrive. They thrive.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's all about treating the patient, not the labs, treating the
Yeah.
symptoms, not the labs, um, that not being gaslit, all the things.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, what do you want to leave us with? Like, where do we go from here, Mandy?
Well, I'll tell you, you just need to have a collaborative relationship. And you need to be informed, and be your own advocate at times. Being your own advocate is so very important. This is important right now in this time in history where hormone is so misunderstood. Of course, we talk a lot. We spend so much time educating people about Women's Health Initiative, how estrogen does not cause breast cancer, it prevents breast cancer, it does not cause disease, it prevents chronic disease. And because most of the people in this who are listening to this right now have heard their entire adult life that hormone replacement therapy is risky. And that data's been debunked 6 years ago, but the standard of care hasn't changed yet. And we don't have a decade while we wait for this new congressional bill to change the culture in the medical industry. We don't have 10 years to wait for us to feel better in our transitions as we're middle-aged women and menopausal women. So advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. And of course, make sure that you have providers who are academically driven. And sometimes, unfortunately, in a fallen world, you're going to bump into people who are like, this is always the way we've done it. And so sometimes it's going to be the functional medicine who really kind of has, not to be controversial, but you almost cannot avoid controversy in the subject matter. But a lot of centralized traditional medicine is really driven by pharmaceutical industry. You just have to follow the money on that. And it's not that the hearts of the people in this who've been in this training for the last 20 years in residency have unequal heart. It's just that this is the training that they've been given.
They don't know better.
They just don't know better. I've been that provider.
Yeah,
And
me too.
so I know how that is, and I sit in seats and eat and train with many endocrinologists and pain management and gynecology and hormone health who are now flocking. There's this exodus from traditional centralized medicine. There's this exodus to functional space where you're free to do things according to evidence-based medicine, and it's exciting. It's changing the world.
I love that. Hey, there's just a couple of questions that we've got a couple of minutes to do.
Okay.
And one that I know I asked myself, I asked when we met, if you start thyroid medication, do you have to take it for life?
This is such a good question. I'm so glad you said that. So if you have primary hypothyroidism, your thyroid has absolutely failed for whatever reason that might be, then very likely, yes. Yes, you will. Sadly, but true. And you'll need that for the rest of your life. This other condition, where those patients who we know have normal TSH, we know they're making T4 hormone. We know that. They've got great TSH. They have great T4. Their thyroid gland is working. These clients who we support with what we call off-label thyroid support with desiccated thyroid in small doses, these people have a downstream issue from their thyroid gland. This is not at the gland. It's the injury is not the gland. The injury is at the transport of the high thyroid hormone into the cell where it makes you feel differently. Those people have what functional medicine calls type 2 hypothyroidism. So again, it's a downstream problem from the gland. That process can heal. And no, that does not mean that you are going to be on thyroid hormone for the rest of your life. If you can heal that process together with all the other components of taking care of the pillars of wellness, then yes, that absolutely can heal. And there's hope for that. We have many clients who start on a desiccated thyroid therapy, and within a year or two that they are able to discontinue that because they have had breakthroughs with that. So no, I also wanted to say this, that there's a historical, I've never met anybody like this, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was a group of clinicians who were unorthodox and unhealthy, and they would prescribe desiccated thyroid in the name of fatigue relief and weight loss, these super mega high doses of desiccated thyroid. And what they were doing in these uncanny venues is generating an artificial Graves' disease in the name of fatigue relief and weight loss. I don't think any of those really exist right now, especially in the light of weight loss peptides that are available. But I want people to know that I help clients understand that we're not in that camp when we prescribe these trace doses of thyroid hormone and desiccated thyroid, that this is not the same therapy that was so unorthodox and unhealthy and absolutely malpractice that's out there. So when we see that, they say, will we lose weight on desiccated thyroid? And the answer is absolutely yes, you will. Are we going to induce Graves' disease? No, we're not going to do that. But what people will notice is they'll say, wow, I put this bathing suit on last summer and it just fit a little tighter, but here it is, it fits differently. Or this Easter dress or this Christmas, when they go through the seasons, they'll find that they've changed their body morphology. And the reason for that is that people who have more ATP simply move more.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone wants to know if you work virtually with clients.
I do.
Okay, so you do have virtual setup on your
Yes,
website?
we do.
Yay. Okay. And
Yes.
I put her website at the very top of the chat feature, guys. We'll also make sure that that comes with the replay. So be sure you follow Solutions Functional Medicine on social media. Check out our website, and you too can set up an appointment
Oh,
to meet with this amazingly smart woman who
well, thank
is
you.
so good.
Our website is making a complete overhaul, and even in the next 72 hours, it will look completely different. So don't judge me that the website's not as updated. But one thing I can promise you is accurate is that we will have our phone numbers there, and we have a wonderful team who will help you get set up to talk to us.
That's awesome. Two more questions, just really quick. I thought they were interesting. Someone asked, oh wait, no, where did they go? Anything that you can comment on the treatment of hypothyroid in someone with osteoporosis? I mean, I would say, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, well, I'm gonna do some assuming that this client is menopausal. And the number one treatment for osteoporosis and osteopenia is healthy estrogen, healthy progesterone, healthy testosterone, and healthy trace doses in women. We know that if you medicate these clients correctly, they increase their bone density by 3% a year, compounded every year. Functional medicine is on the bullhorn, waving the flag, saying, listen, this reverses bone loss. Boniva, Fosamax, this class of medications do not do that. They disrupt the gut significantly. They cause malnutrition. Do your homework on that before you agree to that with your provider, and know that they do not reverse bone loss. Healthy hormone by a menopause specialist will help you reverse osteoporosis.
Is there any contraindication to treating your thyroid if you have osteoporosis?
No,
Yeah, no.
no,
I mean,
no.
your thyroid is plays a role in your bone health. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um,
Was it legal to have a healthy thyroid when we were younger? Yes.
yeah, yeah.
It's legal to have a healthy thyroid for life.
Exactly. And just one question about POTS, which I'm not very familiar with, but if we take electrolytes for POTS, should we also take iodine?
Oh, I would love for people to learn more about iodine. I also want you to, before, more so than iodine, consider micromineral, especially magnesium. Magnesium, magnesium, magnesium. Let me leave you with that. There's magnesium stearate and taurate and glycinate, L-threonate. There's so many, and orate. Our most common magnesiums are oxide and citrate. They're limited benefit to us. They're magnesiums that are good for our anxiety and sleep and our gut and our elasticity of our blood vessels, that help blood pressure. Find a multiple magnesium source to help with POTS, as well as other microminerals. Get something that has the weirdo minerals in it, like boron and copper and vanadium and chromium and molybdenum, for goodness sake. Nobody knows how to spell that, right? And manganese. These things are super important for hemodynamic stability and are underestimated. And you can get a lot of that actually through mineralized salt, such as Redmond's real salt or Celtic sea salt.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, Mandy. Thank you so much. You are, I mean, I've heard her talk about this at least 3 times. I'm still taking notes. I feel like it finally clicked. So you guys are going to want to listen to this a couple of times. And today we just talked about thyroid. So I'm excited to bring her back maybe in a couple of months and talk more about hormone replacement therapy and testosterone and progesterone and everything. She is an absolute wealth of information. So we really appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, I just want to put a big plug in there. If you are interested in optimizing your lifestyle to get your thyroid working as best it can, I have a new session of Lean starting on Monday. Jump in and we can work on all those lifestyle things like sleeping better, optimizing your nutrition, fasting, all the things. And I'd love to have you. You're going to get the replay. There's also a special discount code that you can use to jump on. And you guys stay tuned. We'll be back with more information. Talk to you later. Bye.